Hello, thanks everybody. Mick? We're good to go?
A few more coming in now.
Alright, we'll just wait.
Just stand it.
It's alright, apparently the clock started, don't worry about it. Okay, thanks everybody for coming today, appreciate it. I'm going to hand over to Duncan now and we'll work our way straight through the agenda. Duncan.
Thanks, Grant. Apologies as follows for today's meeting: Captain Lauder, Malcolm Fair, Emma Anderton, Gary Richardson, Dean Rhodes and Debbie Jones.
Are there any more apologies that Duncan needs to be aware of? Okay, move on to the next item, Duncan.
Announcements. I'd like to welcome everybody to the annual general meeting of the Fylde Central Benefits and Services branch. I'd like to welcome all guests, including the guest speaker James Sorrow from Blackpool Against the Cuts. If anybody has any additional childcare expenses in order that they could attend today's meeting, can you please see Alistair Mitchell after the meeting? Also, if anybody's used their own transport, you can claim, and again see Alistair Mitchell after the meeting if you want an expenses claim form. I believe the taxi going back to Warbrack is leaving at about 2:20. If you can't hear too well, please move forward and fill up the chairs. If anybody's got any problems with the lighting and cannot see the documents, can you give Mick Daniels a call and we'll see what we can do about the light in that area. If anybody's too hot or too cold, again, please get Mick's attention, we'll see what can be done. If you are new to the AGM, at the back of the pink motions booklet, there's a guide as to how meetings proceed. The toilets are through the door. The fire and bomb exits, I believe, are at the back, I believe, or through there. And there's not a drill planned for today. Hardship Fund. The branch has established a hardship fund, so if you want to donate, there's a bucket collection, which Gary, I believe, has. Time for today's meeting. It was originally announced by the DWP that there wouldn't be time for today's annual general meeting. However, things have changed slightly. If you work in the DWP, you've been afforded the following time for the AGM 2015. 45 minutes flexi credit, plus reasonable travelling time to and from the venue, plus reasonable time for the local constituency meetings that will take part in this meeting. That part used to take 30 minutes, so that's 1 hour 15 plus reasonable travelling time. There's an additional 30 minutes time on a flexible basis for staff on fixed hours. This includes those who have no lunch break factored into their timings. It's understanding members draw on this 30 minutes or part of it, they're expected to pay it back. The details, if you want them, are in writing there from me to the employer confirming. If you work in the private sector, your employer may still allow a credit, as previously had done, to attend. There's an equality survey on the chairs for those who want to fill it in and hand it in to Alistair Mitchell at the end of the meeting. Those are all the announcements I have, Chair.
Thank you, Duncan. Shall we move on to the next item of address then? Next item of business is the adoption of standing orders. Duncan.
I believe we've got election of the teller right next. I would suggest Martin Jones as teller.
Martin, you're a teller. I don't think we'll need any more tellers. Standing orders, Duncan.
Yeah, item 4, adoption of standing orders, order of business. We're on the pink booklet. Motions A1 to A10 are all acceptable for debate and therefore been A-marked. I've endeavoured to put the motions in some form of order. There are no emergency motions this year. It is proposed that the following motions, A4 to A10, which were carried at last year's AGM, be accepted without debate under standing orders. A4 is a motion to National Conference about public transport issues, in particular the need to oppose the cuts to public transport and to end deregulation as carried at last year's AGM. A5 is a motion to National Conference about paternity leave, which calls for better paternity leave as carried at last year's AGM. A6 is a motion to Group Conference about public and privilege leave, which calls on the DWP Group Executive Committee to seek to ensure that members with alternative working patterns are not adversely affected by the changes to public and privilege leave imposed by the employer in 2013, a motion that was carried at last year's AGM. A7, a motion to group conference about the need to continue the campaign to oppose the government's policy of pay freezes and severe pay restraints, carried at a previous year's AGM. A8 is a motion to national conference about the need to continue the campaign to oppose the government's attacks on our pensions, carried at a previous year's AGM. A9 is a motion to national conference about the need to continue the campaign to restore the real civil service compensation scheme, carried at a previous year's AGM. A10 is a motion to DWP group conference about annual leave and particular restrictions on annual leave over the Christmas-New Year period, as carried at a previous year's AGM. I therefore propose standing orders as outlined on the pink document.
Thank you, Duncan. Can this be agreed? Thank you. Next item is me. Thanks again for attending today. I just want to speak briefly before we commence with the main business. PCS and its membership find itself in the toughest industrial relations climate for its members in decades. Not just in the DWP or the civil service, but across the UK public sector as a whole, trade unions face a battle. This government continues its attacks on working people and the public facilities on which we rely, and the social consequences of these attacks in our local communities are all too stark and cannot be underestimated. We at DWP have experienced what amounts to a 20% wage cut in real terms over the past 5 years, a suspension to any notion of pay progression, the erosion of flexibilities in the workplace, making work-life balance so lauded by the DWP as progressive policy, but seen by its staff as an empty and as credible as a piece of blurb of the type you see in the back of a really bad book by Clive Cussler. Apologies if you're a Cussler fan, Nick. And if you think that's pretty awful, and it is, then developments for staff and universal credit, the government's shiny new benefit delivery project, would make you shudder. We've seen increased contributions to our pensions and the extension into our late 60s for some of us before we can collect it. In the wider context, we see attacks on the NHS, increased transport costs, rent rises, utility rises, food banks, and so on. And all this while states in the City of London and beyond bend, twist and exploit every government-sanctioned legal loophole with apparent impunity. To quite honestly rob us while the poor and the vulnerable are demonised because of the mess that these wolves of Threadneedle Street have put us in. And only this week, MPs have boasted that they actually don't have to work hard, but at the same time, in righteous indignation, they have claimed that they really ought to be paid more. Paid more so that they can sit at their table at the club with their peers and their peers from the financial industry on equitable terms. Quite frankly, a scandal and an insult to us all, and personally, I hope that we all vote in May to ensure that these privileged few are not returned to Parliament again, but instead sent to sign on and face sanctions, poverty and despair. Bitter? Not me, but I'm definitely angry. Okay, gloomy? Well, yeah, but not all. PCS is still here. We fight on. It isn't easy, but we do fight on. And we've had wins industrially, across the civil service and within DWP. The strikes at Garston in Liverpool, where significant concessions have been won for staff and where jobs have been protected. Look at the win for land registry staff, who won the legal battle for its disabled staff for their unfair treatment under the attendance management processes. And look at the Birchwood apprentices, where 25 school leavers in the North West were told within a matter of hours of starting their jobs that they must move to Leeds or lose their jobs, who, through the support of PCS, were able to remain in the area where they were employed. And the National Gallery, where staff presently engage in action against the privatisation of galleries, which has achieved great support across the country for its cause and its members, and they fight on. And your representatives. I should mention them all, but I don't have time because the department has slashed our facility time. Some of you here will have met them through the year, mostly for their own reasons. They work extremely hard in difficult circumstances, doing their best and more often than not succeeding in protecting members at the wrong end of the DWP attendance, disciplinary and leave policies. It isn't all about personal cases. We have other matters to focus on collectively. But when our members need us, our reps are there, and I thank them for that. And we're still here, and with your support we shall remain so. And with the support of all our PCS members, we shall win. Thank you. Next item, Duncan.
Thanks, Grant. The next item is the elections, which is item 6 on the agenda. On page 3, you'll see the list of branch officers who were elected at the cut-off point. We have vacancies for 3 branch officers. For a young members officer, which I think, Paul, off the top of my head, 28 and below, so that's not me. Assistant Secretary CMG and Assistant Secretary Corp Centre Shared Services. So we have 3 officer vacancies.
Okay, anybody from the floor would like to declare an interest in one of those vacancies? Okay, if you would think on that, if you contact Mick at the side of the auditorium or contact Duncan or I sometime in the coming days, then we'll look to see what we can do about that. Okay?
We have auditors' vacancies for 2 auditors and the Women's Committee 12 places. I've got an indication from Gary Richardson that he's interested in being an auditor.
Okay, firstly, can we agree Gary Richardson as an auditor?
Yes.
Thank you. As Duncan said, we still have a vacancy for auditor. Unfortunately, it is something you would have to do in your own time. So if anybody would like to volunteer, either volunteer today by contacting Mick or letting me know now, or failing that, contact me or Duncan in the coming days. Thanks.
Yeah, we've got vacancies as follows for the branch executive committee. The people elected on the BEC at the cut-off point are also on page 3. We have the following vacancies: Norcross, 1 vacancy; Warbeck, 7 vacancies; Peel Park, 8 vacancies; and the private sector area, 3 vacancies. I have 2 people who have indicated they will be interested in joining the BEC from Peel Park, which is Alex Johnson and Steve Fairbrother.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for putting yourselves forward there. Can those 2 nominations be agreed? Yes. Thank you. Likewise, for the other nominations that Duncan, or the other areas where we have vacancies that Duncan just spoke about, please either let me or Duncan know today, or Mick today, or contact us thereafter, and we will look to get you on the BEC. Duncan.
Yeah, item 7, unless anybody wants to join the BEC, 12 minutes time. 5. Item 7, adoption of the minutes to 2014 Fylde Central Benefits Services Branch AGM and the mandated meeting minutes. The minutes have been circulated for more than 42 days and no comments have been received.
Okay, can those minutes be agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Duncan, presentation of annual report.
Thanks, Grant. In the 1 hour that we've got, I'll present the annual report. The branch annual report was a document that went out electronically. 2014 was a very hectic year for the branch. During the year, the branch was heavily involved in the campaign to defend the civil service pensions, to oppose the job cuts, to oppose the 10-year pay freeze or extreme pay restraint. We were involved in the national strikes on the 10th of July and the 15th of October. In 2014, we witnessed a continuation of the new extreme pay restraint for members of the DWP, with below-inflation rises. There was no pay progression for those below maximum to move them towards maximum. There were payments in the form of one-off non-consolidated payments based on box markings and grade. This meant that for a lot of members, they had pay cuts in real terms of between 15 to 25% over a 10-year period. Hence why we're involved in the national strikes in July and October. In 2014, we witnessed the 3rd tranche of the public sector workers' tax levied on us, dressed up as pensions contributions. Pensions are deferred pay. They want you to pay more for your pensions, hence the public sector workers' tax, work longer and receive less. This is part of the continuing bad news from the condemned government, who expect the low-paid public sector workers to pay for the financial crisis in terms of their jobs, our pensions, our pay and our conditions of service. Turning to the tax on jobs, there were further exit schemes announced in spring and summer 2014. Good news for those who wanted to go, but of course the people going are replaced. So there'll be more job losses or more lost jobs as people taking the exits leave. There was announcements of recruitment during 2014, however this wasn't permanent recruitment. We've already witnessed well over 3,000 permanent job cuts in the DWP in the Fylde area. Cuts of this magnitude are devastating to the area. In 2008 we witnessed a closure of the DWP Moorland Road site. In June 2012 an announcement was made that the majority of the DWP Norcross site would also close. There was a legal challenge against the employer's attempt to deny members their paid travelling time under workforce management redeployment policies for those who were compelled to travel outside of their daily travelling as a result of that closure. The employment tribunal took place over weeks commencing the 24th of November and the 1st of December 2014. Unfortunately, with the exception of Equality Act issue, which was about lighting for one of the members concerned, the case was not successful. During 2013, shared services moved from the DWP to the Cabinet Office and then was privatised to Stereo. During 2014, it was announced that Stereo would be remaining at DWP Norcross, however there would be large-scale permanent job losses and cuts. Exits and redundancy process quickly kicked in with significant numbers of staff leaving. There had been recruitment of temporary workers subsequently in Stereo at DWP Norcross. Members working in Balfour Beatty Workplace transferred to Copley. Due to the extension of scanning, the future of certain groups of members at Faraday Way House Court or House remains in doubt in 2015. Even if you work in the areas that weren't designated as being the areas for the cuts, i.e. the frontline areas, you'll have witnessed the impact of the job cuts, with people leaving and not being replaced, and additional pressures on those left behind trying to cope with more and more work with fewer and fewer staff. Hence you see increased targets, attacks on conditions of service such as leave at Christmas and New Year, and leave throughout the year. And you may have been caught up in attempts to get rid of people on the cheap by means of capability, conduct or attendance management. Or you might find that your job has changed somewhat. The branch will continue to campaign vigorously against any detriment to our pay, our jobs, our pensions and our conditions of service. Of course, this level of activity on pay, jobs, pensions and conditions of service creates hundreds of requests for advice, guidance and support. This is on top of the hundreds of personal cases the branch has dealt with over the year. During the year, the branch communicated with members by several means such as circulars, meetings, desktops and the newsletter, with desktop key items such as industrial action to ensure that we also recruit new members throughout the year as part of those hard copy desktops. 2014 has also seen the witness of the attacks and the manner of subscriptions are collected, with the Tories and the government hell-bent on withdrawing subscriptions collection from source, which is known as check-off, and trying to undermine PCS by reducing the fund the union needs. The branch was highly involved in the campaign to oppose the removal of check-off and then to campaign to collect members' details for direct debit in order they could switch their payment to using that method. At present we have near 65% membership density in the branch. This represents an improvement in membership density against a falling backdrop of membership levels and even further falling levels of potential membership. I'd like to thank the legions of people who helped with the desktops to promote the events, do the members' meetings and try and get members to switch to direct debit. These campaign activities have been a success and have brought in some new members as well as trying to retain existing members. It's incredible what's been achieved by a small number of activists, often working in their own time to defend the rights, jobs and careers of many members. Finally, there is an end. I'd like to thank all those who've moved on during the year or have indicated they're not going to continue today on the BEC. This is a long list. Jim Marsh, who has been on the BEC and was latterly a health and safety rep at Warbrick, who retired in May 2014. Lynn Kennedy, who was made redundant from Stereo and now is working in the MOD. Debbie Jones, Dean Rhodes and Clark Nuttall, who've been on the BC from Warbrett for several years. Bill Roberson, the Assistant Secretary for Peel Park, CMG, who left in October 2014. Bill's drive and determination and incisive contribution will be sorely missed by the branch. Jackie Dunkley, the branch treasurer, escaped on an exit package in June 14. Jackie had been active for 15 years in roles of equal ops, organiser and treasurer. Jackie's commitment, sense of proportion and organising of the AGM and conference accommodation will be sorely missed by the branch. And John Colgan, the branch treasurer who left on an exit package this month. John's legendary appetite for assisting the members and commitment to self-sacrifice to get the job done will be missed. Thanks for all the work over the period.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay. Alistair, would you like to move the financial report?
Alistair Mitchell, Branch Treasurer, present the statements of branch accounts for 2014. These are in the last 2 pages of the pink booklet. The main account. Balance brought forward was £2,516.56. The income and expenditure was as stated. The balance carried forward the 1st of January 2015 was £1,228.32. The number 2 donation account. The number 2 donation account consists of donations from branch representatives and officers and has been used for such things as financing observance to conference, donations and Christmas gifts to branch support services for the hard work over the year. The balance brought forward was £836.99. The income and expenditure as stated, and the balance carried forward on the 1st of January 2015 was £408.99. The hardship fund account. The branch established a hardship fund account in 2011 to assist members suffering from extreme hardship as a result of them taking industrial action. The balance brought forward was £361.14. The income and expenditure was as stated, and the balance carried forward on the 1st of January 2015 was £383.39. 2014 has been a busy year for the branch, and the branch has remained solvent. I would like to thank my predecessors, Jackie Dunkerley and John Colgan, who were the treasurers during the year, until Jackie left the DWP in June 2014 on an exit package, and John left the DWP in February 2015, again on an exit package.
Thank you, Alistair. Are there any questions for Alistair on that financial report? Any questions on what Duncan said in his report? Okay, can we... Okay, I'd like to introduce James Sorer, who's kindly come along from Blackpool Against the Cuts to speak with you today. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to come along, colleagues. My name, as you know, my name's James Sorer. I have been an active trade unionist for far too long, and it's good for one's sanity, especially in the current climate. And what we're going through now, I have to say, I grew up through the tough years of the Thatcher government and all the attacks that were made on our movement then and on our society then. And what we're going through now is far worse in so many respects, as your chairs just eloquently described. The attacks that are going on against your union in particular and the services that your members work in are quite horrendous. And it's going to get worse if this lot are re-elected. Well, I'll say re-elected, actually get back into power after the next general election. I'll be perfectly blunt with you about that. Can you imagine what they've been able to get away with in coalition with a party that actually claimed to be a fairly progressive party, but has actually enabled this horrendous attack on working people and people such as people such as yourselves, your friends and family? Can you imagine what a majority Tory government would look like and how that would affect us? Because make no mistake about it, this government is intent on taking us back to the 30s. And I don't just mean the 1930s, I'm talking about the 1830s, the days before universal suffrage, the days when trade unions were illegal. And if you think that's a bit over the top, then consider the following. Consider the attacks on your union, the attack on Chekhov. Consider the proposals that are being drummed up by Francis Maud and Eric Pickles, which will effectively make striking in the public sector illegal with the 50% threshold, and all the other attacks that are going to come on that. There will be more scrutiny of strike ballots. There will be a massive attack on facility time, where it will be virtually impossible to run a meeting like this during work time. And it will also become impossible for your reps to actually carry out the duties because there won't be any facility time. This is all coming, believe me, and we need to stop it. So how have we got here? What's actually going on? Well, can I introduce you to a word many of you may already know it? Neoliberalism. That's the enemy, and it's important to know that enemy. It's more commonly known as Thatcherism, or if you were American, Reaganomics. And it's the economic theory that was utterly discredited in the late Victorian period, when the Thames became an open sewer, and our legislators in the House of Commons thought, you know what, government really needs to do something about this. And there was constant cholera outbreaks. That ushered in an era of interventionist governments, which was resisted at the time by certain political thinkers, particularly one called Herbert Spencer, working on a theory that goes back to Adam Smith. Utterly discredited, and the history of the United Kingdom and most of Western Europe from the next 100 years was one of slow, incremental social progress up until the post-war consensus period, 1945 to 1979, where governments believed, of all hues, believed that, you know, the aim of government was to provide full employment and increasing standards of living for all. That's been comprehensively trashed by this way of thinking. Neoliberalism, as we see it now, was certainly grew out of the School of Economic Thought in Chicago University, Milton Friedman and Hayek. Their view was very much one of government should be absolutely minimal, and it needs to get out of the way of business. That way enterprise, I'm sure you all know the arguments, will flourish and we'll all benefit from trickle down. Now I'm going to be a bit crude here. The only trickle down that's occurring now is that of a yuppie's urine on a tramp's face. And it's going to get far worse, trust me on this, because there is no such thing as trickle down. What's actually happening is robbery on a grand scale. And it's the robbery of our future, of our jobs, of our pensions, and the futures of your children and your grandchildren, to have the right to full employment, to have the right to have a job and prospects. And it's going on at an horrendous pace. Within Blackpool alone, we have millions of pounds worth of cuts, and it's also applying to Wyreborough as well, and to a lesser extent Fylde. We've seen privatisation at a scale that we've never seen before. This is with the return of the coalition government. The NHS is being privatised as we speak. Make no mistake about that. This is going on, and it's going on now. 90% of NHS services that have had to go through the compulsory tendering process that was introduced through the Social Care and Health and Social Care Bill by Andrew Lansley, 90% of the services that have gone through that process have been privatised. You may ask, well, is that too bad? Virgin, you know, Richard Branson, he's a nice chap, isn't he? You know, his beard and his penchant for publicity. So long as it's free at the point of use. Have you noticed stories in the news at the moment? Because these are the outliers. This government will use, and they have done for a long time, they will use the press, their friends in the Tory press, the people who own them in fact, to actually get people to look at the wrong areas. So it's never the politicians who are wrong, it's never the friends in the city who nearly bankrupted this nation, and are now making us bail them out through pay freezes and job cuts. No, it's never them. It's the unemployed. It's the scroungers. It's the immigrants. And a similar thing is happening with the NHS, because when private sector providers come in, they will demand a profit. They will require a profit. They're not in it because they're good people. They're in it because they're in business. And business expects to make a profit, as you would understand. Nothing wrong with that when you're talking about a corner shop or a factory making desirable goods, but not in our public services. And if you want to see an example of where this is already happening, have a look at our railway industry, where subsidies to the industry are 3 times as much when it was good old British Rail, who I used to work for. Well, I say work, but anyway. And we pay the highest fares in Europe. Funnily enough, strange, I was just travelling from Manchester today and I saw 2 trains from 2 companies, and you may be pleased to know that we do have some public ownership of railways, state ownership. Unfortunately, we're talking Deutsche Bundesbahn and Netherlands State Railways, who run the Northern franchise and the Arriva Wales franchise, respectively. This is the absurdity of it. But the point is, it costs 3 times as much to the taxpayer, and we pay the highest fares. The same will happen with the health service. There will be runaway costs associated with this private delivery, and eventually, that won't be because of shareholder profit extraction. Oh, no. It'll be because of you lot, us. Because we smoke too much, or we drink too much, or we eat too many pies. Whatever it is, it'll be your fault. And that's when you can see it, can't you? You can see old ham-face, our wonderful Prime Minister sitting and standing there. Well, it's very regrettable, but I'm afraid we're going to have to introduce charges to see your GP. It's okay, it's only people in work who have to pay it for now. And so it begins, where eventually you will have an American-style insurance model health service. And it's happening right now. Going back to what we're about in Blackpool Against Cuts is we want to raise awareness, we want to raise people's consciousness so they know the nature of the attack which is happening to them. And put in a nutshell, it's the attempt by the 1%, the richest in our society, to claw back all the power and all the wealth to them at the expense of us. And this government is not just, are they vindictive, venal and vicious, they're also incompetent. Because this crisis, this so-called austerity that we're involved in, is a direct result of the shenanigans that were played out in the international finance markets, and particularly the City of London, coming a cropper. A direct result of that. Not the last Labour government spending far too much on public service. If only. No, it certainly wasn't that. And they managed to rewrite history, and it's our job to tell people actually what happened. And to the credit of the last government, we were actually coming into recovery in 2009, 2010, because of the good old-fashioned Keynesian pump-priming economic policies that government indulged in spending more on infrastructure. There were some cuts as well, but there was also more money actually put into the real economy rather than into the banking system, just to be shovelled around a few usual small number of hands. And this government put that in reverse, to the point where we have a double-dip recession. And I maintain we are not in recovery at all. Because what kind of recovery means that we're all walking around with less money in our pockets? All of us, the vast majority of us. We have permanent pay freezes. Those of your colleagues that have been made redundant, I tell you now, and this is with great regret, they will struggle to find decent employment that's secure, that isn't precarious, that isn't 0 hours. Even people with good qualifications, it's becoming more and more difficult. So there is a sea change happening in our society, and it's one that's going to disadvantage us greatly. And we need to do something about it. And that's why we formed Blackpool Against Cuts through Blackpool Trades Council. BAC operates as a campaigning organisation with an organic link with the Trades Council. We've grown out of the trade union movement. Our aim is to get more people involved and to spread the message that this is not inevitable. It doesn't mean to say that because governments of various hues, to a certain extent, are bought into this neoliberal consensus. Things have changed for the better in the past, and they can again, when there's the will, when people become involved and become active. And that's our role as trade unionists, and we work very closely with all union branches, other campaigning groups such as 38 Degrees, the People's Assembly, and also other political parties. We have very good relationship with the Labour Party and Labour candidates and MPs in Blackpool, and we're developing links with the Green Party. And, you know, we do have people from other left parties who will get involved. We are not a party political organisation in that we back one particular party, but we are an intensely political organisation, and we want to work with our colleagues across the country in the anti-cuts movement to change this country for the better. And even if we do get a Labour government in there, and that's becoming an if, and I for one will be working very hard to ensure that happens, but even if we do, that doesn't mean the end of it, because there are people who to a lesser extent still believe in a form of neoliberalism, who believe in a need for some kind of austerity policies, most notably the Shadow Chancellor. So well, the arguments will go on and they will continue. Even if the worst, God forbid, the Tories are re-elected or able to cobble together another coalition, we will continue to campaign, and we will have to build that campaign, because we're looking at nothing less than your children, our future, and your children's future, and your children's children's future. And it won't look pretty, it won't look good if this kind of political strategy continues. In practical terms, what that means for Blackpool Against Cuts is running a whole number of activities, particularly in getting the message across through media, by letters to the paper, sometimes doing articles in the politically correct column in the Gazette, talking to local radio, and having regular street stalls in the town centre and regular meetings. We've had a number of high profile, very well attended public meetings, particularly around the NHS and around the vicious sanctions regime that the DWP is enforcing upon yourselves, to enforce, you know, your members in that section, to enforce upon the unemployed. So there's a lot to do. And just in practical terms, we will be, in the next few weeks coming up, we're running a regular stall on Victoria Street in the town centre. Please come along and show your support. That's from 10:30 to 3 p.m. And that's in support of the TUC's Fair Wage campaign, which is obviously a very key issue. And we're also going to be having a demonstration at the Job Centre on Queen Street against sanctions. That's at 2 p.m. I know that might be difficult for some of you to attend, but I'm just telling you some of the kind of things we'll be doing. And we are going to be planning another campaign rally to defend the NHS in conjunction with 38 Degrees. We also get involved, as I say, in regular discussions with certainly the Labour group on Blackpool Council and the leader of Blackpool Council to discuss what their approach to cuts is. And local government really has a load of gun to its head, and it's often the case of how we actually administer that in the fairest possible way, whilst at the same time getting the political message across that this is unacceptable and it's the fault of central government. And I have to say, although this isn't particularly a problem in Blackpool, I do think a lot of Labour leaders around the country in certain councils are not very good at articulating that, putting the blame squarely where it lies. So these are the practical things that we are doing, and we will continue to do that and raise awareness. But like every organisation, we need more people like yourselves to get involved. And we have brought more people in, some environmental activists, talking of which we, through Blackpool Trades Council, are now opposed to fracking. I personally believe that's a very good thing, because fracking is a dangerous technology, an untried and untested technology, which will ruin our natural landscape in the Fylde, with hundreds of football-sized industrial pitches where there used to be nice fields. That's before we even get into concerns of poisoned water tables and earthquakes, which have happened. So that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to build. That's the consensus we're trying to build. And it's about local action and getting people engaged in these big ideas, these big issues, which are happening. There is a tendency, I think, as human beings to sometimes bury your head in the sand and hope it's not going to be me. But believe me, with this turbo Tory neoliberal agenda, it's going to happen to all of you. I'm afraid that the days of the secure, well-paid job are becoming a thing of the past, and we need to be alive to that. But nothing's inevitable. Our predecessors, 100 years ago, started from a very low point, and they built up a strong trade union movement. And they built up a movement which, in the post-war period, through Labour governments, are actually moving the whole of the political agenda so far in a progressive direction that even Tory governments, up until Thatcher, had to buy into quite a lot of this. It was the post-war consensus. We built the highest living standards in human history, not just in the UK, but across the Western world. And it's this that's been in reverse since 1979. You always have to think ahead when we're looking at politics and history. The two are interrelated. And believe me, they've always had a plan. And we, for far too long, have played catch-up. What we want to do in organisations like Blackpool Against the Cuts and the Trades Council, and the wider trade union movement, is to start taking the lead in this and anticipate the attacks and do everything that we can to prevent it and to engage people politically. Because the more who get involved, the more untenable this will become for any government to enact. Okay? Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks a lot, James. Thanks for the context and the history and the optimism as well. I appreciate that. Is there any questions for James now? Okay. Give you a minute. Okay, thanks, James. Duncan.
I think then we're on to item 11, which is nominations. Due to the emergency measures put in place by the National Executive Committee because of the attacks on PCS by the government, or part of it, the NEC and GC elections aren't taking place in 2015. We do have a nomination motion, that's NM1, which is a nomination for capital order for the DWP Group Women's Committee. Those elections, that appointment system, should I say, is going on in 2015.
Can the nomination be agreed? Thank you. Section 12, Duncan, motions.
Yeah, motions, thanks, Grant. Motion A1, which is the attacks on facility time. Duncan Griffiths proposing motion A1 on behalf of the Branch Executive Committee about the attacks on facility time. This affects us all. This affects the ability of representatives to take forward on your behalf the following points: campaigning and negotiating on things like pay, pensions, job security, conditions of service, and others. It affects personal cases, how much time we have, including the types of personal cases we take forward on harassment and bullying, grievances, appeals, disciplinary cases, attendance management cases, and capability cases, etc. It's the amount of time we have to deal with members' questions and queries that come in all the time on pay, leave, conditions of service. It affects health and safety, even though health and safety is covered by legislation. The facility time caps in health and safety time in essence, and the courses. And that's not a full list, that list is not exhaustive. This attack affects us all. This isn't about balancing activist work and keeping them in touch with section work. It's an attack on the union. It's an attack on your rights. It's an attack on your conditions of service. Just in the same way that the attack by the government or part of the government to remove PCS deductions from source, check-off, is an attack on the union in an attempt to bust PCS, this is also an attack on us all. I ask that you support the motion.
Thanks, Duncan. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Any questions on the motion? Okay, can that motion be agreed? All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Duncan. Motion A? Motion 2. Motion 2. There you go. Structures.
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. Duncan Griffiths proposing motion A2 on behalf of the Branch Executive Committee about branch structures in the DWP on the Fylde and Preston area. At last year's AGM, a motion was carried for the Branch Executive Committee to discuss with the West Lancs branch the formation of a new DWP Fylde branch encompassing Norcross, Peel Park, Warbrick, Faraday Way House and the Work Services Directorates at St Anne's, Blackpool and Fleetwood. The proposal was for a genuine DWP Fylde branch. This followed the movement of over 100 members of West Lancs branch from the former Martin Mere site, which is also closed, to Warbrack. There have been discussions at various points of the year to try and move merger proposals on and bring about the creation of a DWP Fylde branch. However, unfortunately, it hasn't been possible to conclude thus far with the West Lancs branch arrangements for the formation of a Fylde branch. The motion instructs the incoming BEC to continue with those discussions. The motion also highlights that there may well be a move with the Preston Central Office branch to discuss merger options with us to form a Preston and Fylde branch. There would be industrial logic to such a merger. We do have groups of members in the same management commands as Preston branch and do regularly hold joint negotiations meetings with the employer with them, and we issue joint bulletins from those meetings. However, there are some possible or potential issues, such as the financial cost of additional travelling and the additional time used for that travelling, and especially with the facility time arrangements as they are. The motion instructs the incoming BEC to hold discussions with the Preston Central Office branch, if they do approach us, and to pick up the points above to see where it gets us. Obviously, any decisions on mergers and terms of mergers and some of the problems and some of the benefits will be put to members in meetings. I ask you support the motion.
Thank you, Duncan. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion or against the motion? So I'll take to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? That vote's carried unanimously. Thank you. Motion 3, Alistair.
Alistair Mitchell, Branch Treasurer, moving motion A3 on the Benefits Directory dress code on behalf of the BEC. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Under the DCS dress code we were on previously, we weren't inundated with people being sent home due to inappropriate dress. Sports clothing aligned with a particular team, shorts, outdoor hats and clothing with potentially offensive logos were banned under that dress code already. Denims and trainers were also banned for staff representing DCS in official business, staff undertaking formal duties, for example interviews, and for staff coming into direct contact with the public. Torn or dirty clothing was also not allowed. The only major difference with the new dress code is that denim jeans and trainers are banned at all times, and that clothing must now be appropriate to an office environment. There's no definition of what that actually means though. It means that managers from different areas could impose their own view of appropriate clothing on their members of staff, leading to different standards within the BD. This was brought in over the festive period, when all staff had additional expenditure. The employer stated they would not be giving any advances to staff to help them purchase the additional items of clothing required. As there's been a 25% cut in real terms in people's wages over the last 5 years, it would make it extremely difficult for some staff to manage to afford this additional expenditure without making cuts in other areas. This motion instructs the GEC to raise with senior management the points in the motion and to consult with a view to achieving a dress code similar to the one we had previously. I ask that you support the motion.
Thank you, Alistair. Anybody wish to speak to the motion or against the motion? Martine.
Just to say that with the merger with Martin Mere and it being a contact centre, and that the contact centre manager, Glenn Jordan, has now been promoted within Warbrack, I think some of the dress codes from Martin Mere is now being amalgamated into Warbrack itself, because we had it at Martin Mere, it wasn't at Warbrack when I came over. So if you're looking to speak with management on that, maybe Glenn Jordan is the man you'd want to target.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I suspect some of the emphasis might have come from Glenn and his team, although we also got Bill Wilson in at the start of the year, and I think it was partly, well, largely his emphasis as well. So I'll go to the vote, if that's right. Thanks, Martin. All those in favour? Okay, anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to the next item, which is adoption of financial report and the annual report. Duncan.
For those who are just thinking what happened to A4 to A10, obviously they were all agreed understanding orders at the start. We're now down to the adoption of the annual report and the financial report, which is item 13 on the agenda.
Okay, first of all, can we agree the adoption of the annual report? Thank you. Can we agree the adoption of the financial report as presented by Alistair, really? Thank you. Okay, that takes us to Duncan, item 14.
Item 14, vote of thanks. I would like to thank the following people. I'd like to thank James Sora, who was the guest speaker, for his contribution to the meeting. I'd like to thank the guests from other branches and other parts of PCS for attending today. I'd like to thank the staff from the Thornton Lecture Theatre for all the work they've done in terms of setting up the meeting and sound checking us. I'd like to thank the teller for all his work during the meeting. We don't have any votes. And finally, I'd like to thank all the members for attending today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and that ends the meeting. Thanks for coming. Tell all your friends what great fun you've had. Make sure you get more next year. Thanks a lot.